When I was a child, I was addicted to tabletop miniature gaming. What game did I play? Well, you're gonna find out because it was... Okay, what game was I addicted to, Victor? Was it Warhammer? No.
I'm afraid not.
Was it Star Wars Armada?
Was
No.
that out?
I don't know.
All those decades ago?
How old am I?
Yeah.
This game, some of you might have heard of it. Some of you might not have heard of it. This game was Heroscape. Came out in 2005 and has been discontinued. I think it was 2005. I'll flash on the screen if I'm wrong.
Yeah, okay.
It came out in the mid to early 2000s and it's been discontinued for like 10 years or something. Very tragic because I love this game.
Yeah.
I dreamt about this game. I had a recurring dream even into high school where I would find copies of this discontinued game at like garage sales and stuff. Many times I had this dream. Bizarre. Game of my childhood. I played this game for so many hours. You might have seen the terrain before. It looks like this. Extremely modular. I spent so many hours building maps and forcing my family to play games with me, but you've never played.
Yeah, I've never even heard of this game. When they just announced this relaunch of it, it like literally was the first time I had ever heard the word Heroscape. And Brad crapped his pants with excitement. And so he's going to teach me the game today. And, we'll talk about my first thoughts and his, 20 years of anxious thoughts about them.
Yeah. So Renegade sent us some review copies for this game. I'm going to teach Victor. It's not a sponsored video, but we're going to play the game and then we're going to tell you whether it's good or bad. Just to stack up to Kill Team. Is it worth buying? Is it not worth buying? Who's it for? All that good stuff.
Yeah.
Review. But first we play.
Yeah.
Let's play. So, we just played your first game of Heroscape.
Yep.
I set up a pretty simple board. We played like a fight to the death, 6th round. First to get table loses, or however many points you have left at the end of the 6th round. It was a bloodbath.
It was.
You tabled me.
Yeah, I rolled pretty hot, which
Yeah.
is nice. I do like this game so far for that reason.
Now you've played Heroscape,
Yeah.
one whole game. What do you think?
So I have a lot of thoughts. It is a deeper game than I originally thought. Like just by looking at it, I will fully admit that I was coming in expecting like, that toy where the cars go up the corkscrew and then down the slide. Like it looked like that to me and it felt like we were going to be like, playing Hot Wheels. But it's not. Like it's a game. It's a game and there's like tactics and strategy. It reminded me a lot of playing other games that we've done on the channel in that like I think there's a pretty high skill ceiling in terms of like knowing your team's rules and knowing the other team's rules. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more going on than I originally thought. Some things I liked about it were that it's like a pretty quick and snappy experience, which I think, more games should prioritize. I'm a brand new person to the game and admittedly, I'm like a game person and have like learned a lot of games and have some skills there, but like I felt like I got it pretty quickly.
You know what? We played the master game, but they have another version of the rules called the basic game.
Really?
Without all the special rules, all the special attacks are gone. A very young child could play that.
Yeah. I mean, we are masters, so. But yeah, I think it was all right. It was better than I expected.
Before we go any further, we should also say, for the record, Renegade Studios did send us a bunch of boxes to try out, review copies. They did not pay us. We're not sponsored, but we did get the new boxes for free. So
yeah, I mean, we're under no obligation to like it or be nice about it or anything.
All right, so first thing, mechanics. I think what it has going for it is it's very simple.
Yep.
It's easy to learn. Like I taught it to you in 10 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Very simpler than Warcry, I would say.
For sure.
So where does the depth of this game stack up with a game like Kill Team? I think it's not in the same ballpark.
No, but at the same time, like I think any game is as deep as you want to make it, right? Like there are checkers players in the world that know that game to a depth far greater than we've ever played Kill Team. you know,
That's true.
even though it's like a simpler game or
Yep.
whatever. And so like, yeah, I think on like first read and it's like kind of main middle of the fairway intention. Yeah, it's not a game that I think a lot of people are going to like study the same way, you know, they keep up with stats and whatever in other games. Like, I just don't think it's for that. But I do think that it's like, there's enough meat on the bone that you could seriously play this game.
Yeah. There are some interesting mechanics that I have not seen in other games. They probably exist. I'm sure they do, some of them. But personally, I have not played a game with the little order markers.
Yeah, that's
so you
cool.
have cards for each of your units. And at the beginning of each round, you put your 4 tokens on your cards. They are hidden from your opponent, labeled 1, 2, 3, and X, which is like a bluff, basically. And then you have to activate for your turn your units in the order that you've put the markers on them. So you have to, you know, order marker 1, you have to activate first, etc. So there is some kind of pre-planning for the round, short-term planning, but also, you know, there's a bluffing element there. It's interesting, you know, like, oh, if I put all my things on this side of the board to activate, then your opponent's thinking, well, do I go all in and we fight on that side, or do I want to put more ordered tokens on the other side? And, you know, there's a little interesting back and forth there that I have not seen before.
No, and I do think that it was a kind of a cool thing to like decide the order that you're going to activate your units beforehand. It's almost like the exact opposite of Shatterpoint in terms of like activation order. And I think both of them are really interesting in that it just like it changed. I do like things that kind of lock you into having to activate something at a certain time. You know, like it takes one more decision out of your hand.
Yeah.
And I like that. I mean, maybe it would get tiring, I don't know, but every once in a while I do find it fun.
Another interesting thing that this game has is there's not so much a focus on your army and my army.
Right.
There's just a bunch of units, and you can basically pick whatever you want to be on your team. That being said, there's not the same ownership of, okay, this is my team that I brought, and they're all a cohesive team.
Right.
One thing that this game has going for it that a lot of people take advantage of is you can play with drafting in the beginning.
Oh, that's cool.
So you have a bunch of, you bring whoever's playing, you all have all your units out on the table, and there's a drafting system that you can take advantage of. And that's
cool.
a very different way to play, and it really switches things up. There's different meta games that can develop in your group.
Yeah. I think that's cool. I love a draft. You know, I think that's like a fun way to approach a lot of games. So that's
I wish
very
we
cool.
played more games, more mini games that had drafting mechanics, you know?
Yeah. But at the same time, like you said, you kind of lose the connection of like, these are my guys,
Yeah.
you know, where you like pour
Yeah.
your heart into like these 8 little pieces of plastic.
Yeah. It's just different.
Yeah, totally.
But that is an interesting element of it that I really, really loved when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And, there's like one specific elven archer that everyone would always draft first.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
like, a whole thing. Okay, what else is good about this game? I love the terrain. I think the terrain is so interesting and cool. I spent hours and hours building maps when I was a kid. I would build maps and then just tear it down before we even played a game on it and make another map. It's kind of like Legos in a way. Extremely modular and hex-based terrain pieces that all snap together really easily.
Yeah.
It looks very different than your typical wargaming table because it looks like the hexes are very obviously gamified.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because I think it's one of those things, it's a bit of Marmite, right? Like I think it could be a barrier for some people to get into it, to think like there's so much suspension of disbelief required to play on it. Whereas other people might really like just appreciate the grid, right?
It's an aesthetic.
Absolutely.
For sure.
You know what it reminds me of is like trying to get someone who's only ever played like AAA games into Minecraft, and they think like this looks so bad, but it's like it's an art style, right?
Or, like pixel graphic games.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
But I think like from a creative aspect, being able to build the maps is cool. Being able to take apart and build an infinite amount of different board setups is really fun. That might have been the number one reason that I love this game, because I just loved, I gotta set up a map and then we can see what happens on it.
Right.
And it's like, I was a kid, I was like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I was not concerned with making maps that were competitive.
Yeah.
I was concerned with making maps that I thought had cool features or looked interesting, and then just like we bashed our teams together to see what happened. And I think for that kind of thing, it's so fun.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. All right. You want to talk about the minis?
Yeah, let's talk about the minis.
In the original run of Heroscape, all the miniatures came pre-painted, and that was a big draw because, this game was in Toys R Us. This
Right.
game was in Walmart, stuff like that. You know, it was sold to kids, and it was sold not as a hobby project,
Right.
but it was a game out of the box that you can play right away. You didn't have to assemble your models. Everything came pre-painted. You could play immediately. The minis that they had back then, you know, they weren't painted to an amazing standard, but they were like fine for when you're a kid and you're just playing, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not gonna take my mini that I got from the Heroscape box to Golden Demon and they're gonna judge it, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, no. But it did the job for what they were offering.
Yeah.
The new version of Heroscape that's come out, they're having two versions right now. One is pre-painted, like before, and then they are also selling unpainted minis for cheaper. It's
Interesting.
basically like a very light gray plastic with kind of like a dark gray wash or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a wash or if it's like just a like kind of release agent or something
Yeah.
that looks like a wash. But I mean, we'll show a picture of
So
an unpainted one.
the minis compared to Games Workshop minis, they are obviously much worse in quality.
Yeah, they're not, but they're like not even the same thing.
It's not even, you
Yeah.
know, I would compare them to, they reminded me a lot of the old soft plastic Legion minis. I don't know if you ever worked with any of those.
Yep.
It's kind of similar to that.
Like it's a similar type of plastic.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're all pre-assembled. Even the unpainted ones come pre-assembled. The soft plastic made it difficult to scrape mold lines.
Yeah, I just didn't.
I had a really hard time with the mold lines. So Victor and I, we both painted one mini each, just
Yeah.
so we could get a comparison of the pre-painted box and what those minis look like versus I gave myself 90 minutes. I don't know how long you spent.
Yeah, I did a lunch break.
Yeah, like I put 90 minutes into painting this, and so you can kind of see the comparison. Obviously, we're not like master painters, but we paint a lot
Yeah.
for the channel.
and it's like this is the amount of time that I would usually spend getting like a kill team model on the table for the channel.
Yeah. So, you know, I went through a few different mindsets as I was painting this. At
Yeah.
first, when I started, I was like, these look interesting. And then once I started scraping the mold lines, between the softness of the plastic and the fact that the mini was pre-assembled, I had a very difficult time getting like the mold lines cleanly off.
Yeah.
And you can see on my finished result, there are lots that I missed or just that I like didn't even like, they looked like they were off. And then when I primed it, I was like, oh, I obviously missed that.
Yeah. For me, I didn't see any of the mold lines until after I primed it and then thought like, okay,
Too
whatever.
late now, yeah.
But I did drill the gun barrel and that was a nightmare.
Oh.
Because of the soft plastic.
Yeah.
It was like trying to drill yogurt.
Right.
Like, you
Yeah.
know, and like the drill was rolling around and it like the gun barrel was bending. But it's not for that. I think
Yeah.
we're bringing like a level. We're bringing a level of hobby detail that isn't necessarily intended for the game. But I still think that, you know, you got to hold the miniatures to a standard of the other miniatures on the market, right?
Yeah. So I don't know how you felt, but once I started painting my mini, I was like, oof, this
Yeah.
is hard. But by the time that I came around and actually finished my mini,
Mm-hmm.
I had come back on it and I was like, actually, this was actually pretty fun to paint.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed it a lot. You know, the middle area of the paint job, like the ugly phase, I was really struggling. But by the
Yeah.
time I finished, you know, I think this looks good.
It does,
I'm pretty
yeah.
happy with what I came out with. And I think you just have to approach it a different way because other mini companies, they make their minis for being painted.
Right.
And I don't think that these minis were sculpted in the same way with that in mind.
Right.
And, you know, like different areas where you'd think on other minis that you'd be used to painting, it's easy to like, oh, they've raised this part so I can easily just like slide my brush across it and get what I need to do
Right.
done. This required a little bit more creativity, but I actually think, you know, like the mini I painted had a lot of wood texture on it.
Right.
And then there was some bone. And I think, you know, just base coated looked awful.
Right.
But once I just went in with one level of highlights, a wash and one level of highlights, I thought, you know, this actually looks pretty decent and it wasn't too difficult.
Yeah.
So it surprised me actually how much I was really surprised by the end that I actually really enjoyed painting this and I'm pretty happy with my result.
So I think a lot of it too is dependent on what the model is because
Yeah.
in general they have like pretty soft details.
Yeah.
And the one you painted has like kind of big shapes and flowing lines and stuff that I
Yeah.
think kind of lends itself to that. The one I did has like chains and buckles and belts and stuff that were like really, really hard to pick out because they were so soft.
I could see that, yeah.
And that I found it, like I just found a lot of it pretty frustrating. And there were a lot of times where like I would paint something and then realize like that it was actually something else, like, oh, that's not his sleeve, that's a chain,
Yeah.
or something like that, right? That I didn't even like notice until I had painted.
Yeah.
And so I think some of them are going to be really fun to paint, and some of them might be a pain. But I think like the bears, they look like fun because they're like kind of big shapes, and the dragons, like the big models, I think will work really well. But like the small stuff with a lot of detail, I
could
think
see that being
is
tricky, yeah.
is tricky just because they're not sharp the same way that other
100%. Yeah.
plastics can hold detail, I think. But another nice thing about the soft plastic is I drop stuff all the time, and I've like broken so many minis on camera, and because this is one piece of kind of flexible plastic, it's a lot harder to break.
Yeah.
It takes a drop well. I pulled it out of my dog's mouth once, and like it was fine.
Dude.
Yeah.
All right, so that's kind of the terrain, the hobby side, and we've talked about the mechanics.
Yep.
So who do we think this game is for? Is this replacing Kill Team or Warcry or any other like top of mind minis game that you're going to see played at a local game store?
In my opinion, no. I think that this is a miniatures game for board game people.
I think that's a great way to put it. I also don't think if you have a group that's used to playing Kill Team with the tactical depth, if you're used to playing with people that, really take the artistry of the hobby side to the next level, I don't think that this is going to necessarily scratch that itch for those people. But it will be amazing for getting people into the mini gaming hobby, especially kids or people that are, like you said, into board games, big board gamers, and you want to try and like get them into the hobby, or just, you want to have them over and they're scared by measuring tapes.
Right. Or yeah, totally, right? Like anyone that knows that you play miniatures games but doesn't play them themselves envisions like old men doing a recreation of the Battle of Waterloo around a table, right? And it's like, I think this is a great gateway into like, it's not that.
As a gateway game, and I know from firsthand experience, as I guess I think I was maybe 11 when I first got this game, this really, really grabbed me for so many of the reasons that we talked about. And I think, for kids, for board gamers, just for like, Uncle Bob that is peripherally interested in, what you're doing, but doesn't have the commitment or the interest in like getting really deep into it.
Yeah.
I think this is like the perfect game. You could teach it so quickly, and all the rules that you need to know really are on your unit cards.
Yeah, reading the card explains the card.
If you have someone at the table that knows the base rules, then all you need are the cards.
Totally. And, like I started playing Warhammer when I was, I guess, like 10 or 11 years old. And it was like so over my head from a motor skills hobby perspective, playing the game. Like we never once actually played a game because it's just like, you can't grasp it, especially that was like, 3rd edition or something, when it was like even more obtuse and impossible to understand and play. And for that reason, I like didn't do any of this hobby for like almost 20 years, right? Like I got really turned off of the whole thing. Whereas I think that as like a starting experience, like you said, especially for kids, I think this is like a great thing. I could totally see bringing this to like my brother's house, who's like not into this stuff, but he'll play a game of Catan, and like I think I could get him here. I really think that it would be a good game for that sort of audience.
And for those kinds of people, for those kinds of players, the pre-painted minis
perfect
are fine.
Yeah.
Or even if you're not a painter, you can get the unpainted minis. You can get 3 colors of craft paint from Michaels. You can get a spray can of primer. You can prime it and do some dry brushing.
Totally.
Anyone can do that. It takes no skill.
Yeah.
So, I think this game, while it might not replace your Kill Teams, your Warcries, your Shatterpoints, I think it certainly has a place. And, if people come over and they're, chatting me up about what I'm doing with my life, I might crack this out and be like, do you want to try this?
I'm going to crack out 2,000 points of Custodes versus Tyranids and ruin their week.
Yeah, well, it would. That'd be the last time they come over.
Yeah, well, that's the point.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, if you're in the market for something to play with your kids, if you're in the market for something to play with, your relatives or your friends that aren't really into mini wargaming, I would highly recommend this game. It was a big part of my childhood, and I'm super pumped that it's back. Just So we could have played that game.
Yeah, it was
Just
fun.
now.
I'll play another game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging around. Like and sub. We'll be back with more tabletop content.
Yeah,
in the
regularly
future.
scheduled programming.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy, folks.
Thanks.